Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today we're going to be talking about something that is so near and dear to my heart. We're going to be talking about podcasting, and more importantly, how to be a great guest on a podcast and why you want to be a great guest on a podcast. So please join me in welcoming Kristin Molenaar to our program today. Welcome, Kristin.
Thanks for having me, Deb. I'm really honored to chat with you specifically about this. I know that you're passionate about it, so this will be fun.
It's going to be fun. We already have chatted for like a half an hour. I really should turn the recording on when we're having those pre-chats. Those would make so much fun. But let me tell people about you, and then we'll jump into this because it's really going to be a lot of great information. So Kristin Molenaar is an entrepreneur enthusiast who lives by the mantra, work less, make more. She enjoys helping entrepreneurs ditch the vanity metrics for true connections. She's the CEO of YesBoss, a digital agency that helps service-based business owners book podcast features so they can generate new leads in just 1 hour per week. So again, Kristin, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Great. Well, I always like to find out a little bit more about my guests. So tell us how it is that you discovered that this is your passion in life, at least for right now.
Yeah. So the way that I discovered this is I had built my business in such a way that my team was really able to be there for our clients and my business didn't need a whole lot from me. Mm-hmm. So this happened officially, I guess, about a year ago now. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I had something that I wanted to share with the world and I had the time to do that. So I'm on a mission to eradicate entrepreneurial stress. I feel passionately that hustle culture needs an alternate message, spoken, that entrepreneurship doesn't have to be quite so hard. Really bums me out when I see people doing things and not making enough money and focusing on the wrong things, all that. So I told my team, I would like to start doing podcast interviews. I feel like this is an easy way where I can, stay home, but get this message across. And, I thought this is a stepping stone to speaking on stage, less scary, right? So I proceeded to tell my team for about 6 months that I wanted to be a guest on podcasts, and I didn't do anything about it because what happened is this sneaky little thing that happens to a lot of entrepreneurs when there's something you really know you should be doing, you're really passionate about it, you get imposter syndrome and you've got all this stuff going on in your head, right? Like
everything else is more important.
Yeah. And then you go to write a pitch and you think, Deb doesn't know who I am. Look at how many podcasts she has. Why would she ever want to talk to me? All those things. So my team late last year said to me, Kristin, this like podcasting thing that you've been talking about, you're not doing it. How about you just let us start pitching you? We're going to take the reins and we're going to get you out there. So I started, I guess it was late last year. I should get my timeline like really straightened up here. So it was late last year because I remember
COVID has made time just totally non-existent.
Right? I'm like, wait, what year is it? We're in the year that nobody's going to want to remember. Yeah, that's right. So my team started pitching me and I was going into being a podcast guest, just wanting to share that entrepreneurship doesn't have to be so hard. Right. And what ended up happening is I started meeting really amazing people and my network started growing. And what I found is that being a podcast guest was actually the most profitable thing that I was doing for my business. It was like this innocent discovery. So at the same time that I started doing podcast outreach for myself, we started doing it for our clients because we did online business management for our clients, like back-end team management. And, in the back of my mind all during this time too, I had been thinking, it's time to niche down again. We need to figure out what's that thing that we really specialize in. Our offering had just gotten a bit wider than I wanted it to be, but I didn't know what yet we wanted to do. So when I looked back at a few months of being a podcast guest, and I would say this was probably in like April. So we had seen a little bit of like what COVID was doing, definitely lost some clients there. And we're like, okay, how is this working? Like just kind of evaluating what it was doing for me. And we realized, oh my gosh, this is actually quite amazing. And it was like this big aha moment. Like, okay, I am going to stop doing all these other things that I think that I need to do, or that are kind of, we're not doing, but we're thinking maybe we should do them. I'm going to just like ditch all of them. And we're just going to help our clients and continue to do for myself, like become a guest on people's podcasts. I love it. It's fun. You know, I show up to chit chat, and sometimes I'm like, pinch me, this is work. Like this is just amazing. So that's how this whole thing started. That's how this became our specialty. It was really out of just seeing how well it worked for me, and then replicating that for the clients that we worked with.
I love it. You know, and I'm always telling people you should either start a podcast and or be on a podcast, but it's certainly much more detailed than that. You have to really think about why you should be doing this. So, you know, why should someone want to be a podcast guest?
I love that question, because I have a very specific answer that I think is not usually
not
something
typical.
Yeah, not typical. So I think when you think about being a guest, you either put it in the category of, you know, traditional marketing strategies. So the marketing strategy is you go to attract a wider audience, right?
Get your name out there, all those.
Exactly. And obviously this does happen. The other is a traditional PR approach. So the PR approach is get your name, you know, be able to get yourself on a large podcast so that you can use the authority of that podcast to like publish it everywhere, you know, as featured on Forbes, you know, that's traditional PR. This is what I've found is, well, there is validity in those things. For me and for our clients, this is, I say, networking on steroids. This is the ability to get in the door with people who can become part of your network. Like you and I now, Deb, know each other. We've been able to chit chat. The conversation that we have through an interview is so much more in depth, and it showcases all of these reasons that we know, like, and trust each other. And then that is also published to everybody else. But for me, it's about meeting hosts that are people that I want to get to know. And so my focus is there. And at the root of it, it's all about connection. It's not about the next PR strategy or marketing strategy. It's about meeting people who I think would be valuable.
I love that. You know, because we clearly get pitched a lot. You know, and we get several a day, you know, and that's very cool. People ask me how I get guests. Well, you know, that's how I get guests. We're fortunate enough that we don't really have to go to people. You know, if I see somebody, like, you know, the other day, a friend of mine on Facebook has redone her business. It looks very interesting. And I said, I'd love to have you on. Or I might know of someone who has written a new book or something like that. And so I'll go to them. But yeah, for the most part, they come to us. And the worst thing for me is when we get the 6 or 7 requests from an agency, from a publicity company. They got 6 new clients that day. So wham, they send me 6 new clients. Are they a good match? Maybe. Are they going to be a good interview? Maybe. Do they know anything about the program? Probably not. Right. And, you know, that's the hard part, is when we get somebody that, you know, they're trying hard, but we know that it's just not a good fit. You know, we got one the other day, and I typically, if we get one that's way unusual, a lot of times I don't even respond. But we had one the other day that wanted to talk about conspiracy theories.
Okay, on your business podcast. Interesting.
Yeah. And going back to Kennedy and who shot Kennedy, and I was like, you know, and it actually, you know, it's kind of one of those, you know, you sit, you watch them on late night TV and you ooh and ah. But I responded to him and I said, you know, this is a business podcast, you know, and therefore not a good fit, you know, and so clearly he had absolutely no idea. I mean, he had not looked at what we did at all. So that is one of the first things that we really look for when someone is wanting to be a guest on our program is, do they even know what we do? And you know, and granted, you would think that a program called the Business Power Hour,
you'd think,
right? but we also, there are guests that we might be able to work differently into that process. I've had a young lady on twice, wonderful, wonderful woman who wrote a book about in vitro fertilization. And she wrote it from her son's point of view. And she pitched this, and I was like, you do get this as a business program, right? And she said, well, she quit her job to do this full time. And here's the marketing strategies. I went, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
And she's written a second book. And so we had her on again. And so that was how we worked that in. But it's so important that there's a good match with the message and with the guest and with the interview on the messaging that they're going to be providing.
I agree. You touched on something that kind of, in my mind, I'm hearing as some confirmation on our process too. And that is, an agency just sending you names and quick information. Like, I think that pitches need to be personalized to some extent. I'll admit, we do a paragraph of personalization and the rest is the same for everybody. But I think that there's a lack of the connection. Like if podcasting, if the root of your desire is to connect with somebody, but your name is just coming across in a list, like what connection is happening? Right. So we function under the umbrella of our client's brand, and we send a message, on their behalf, but it is a unique email from, the client's email, the dedicated email to the host. And sending as an agency, I think that, or having your name sent in a flood of other people from an agency, like you're missing out on the ability to form that connection under your own umbrella. Right. I think that's kind of a bummer.
And you want to be on the various programs for a specific reason.
Right.
And that's the other thing that I think so many people don't have clear. And so talk to us about why people should even be interviewed.
Right. Yeah. I hopefully somebody that's running an agency listens and is modifying the way that they're doing things too. In addition to the people that are sending emails on their own behalf. Yeah, there needs to be a focus on how you're going to show up and serve. I like to include actionable tips. I think that that's an easy way to say how you can serve an audience is being like, this is, the actionable tip that I can offer. Yeah. Oh, goodness.
And you're not being a guest to sell something.
Agreed.
That said, your goal is to sell something, and because you want to be expanding your network, you want to be meeting new people, all of those various things. But, I always get the pitches of, hey, we've got a new book out.
Yep.
Okay. Now I like getting new books just as much as anybody else. But your pitch had better not be, in essence, I want to go on your program to sell more books.
Yep. And I've read those pitches, and they made me very sad.
Right.
Yeah. What I have to say about like bringing or writing your pitch or like how to show up is my philosophy is that if I can just share exactly what I do in such a way that somebody could do my job for me, like I'm basically like giving you enough knowledge to work myself out of a job, then I'm doing my best. Like then I'm showing up and giving enough value. And I think that we have to do that. And to be frank, the best clients come because they've decided not to do it themselves. Right. They want somebody else to do it. So you're not risking anything, but you've got to be value focused. Put everything on the table, put all your chips out there. There's no harm in doing that.
Right. And there's a variety of reasons, to go on the programs, and, and as we said, it is, yes, you do want to expand your network, but you want to, and I'm looking at your website, so I'm going to go through some of these. One of the first ones is that you really want to establish your authority. So talk to us a little bit more about that.
Oh, goodness. Well, that's a really great question. How do I establish my authority?
Well, or how would a guest, so they're going on a program to establish their authority, but they're like, but I make widgets, or I'm a public speaker, or, so what is their authority is maybe.
Yeah. Our focus is primarily on helping service-based business owners. And I would say that it's easiest.
So they're not making widgets.
No, they're not making widgets. So that one is like, how am I going to get somebody? Probably we're not going to be working with them. Let's just say that. Not that there isn't a place for being on a podcast in that, but my wheelhouse is really that service-based entrepreneur. And there's a sharing, like I just said, the sharing of that methodology, like just talk about all the things that you do, share what your method is. So like for me, as an easy example, like how do you write a pitch? What does a good pitch look like? Like how do you show up and be a good podcast guest? What do you do to follow up? The objective here is so that somebody else can do that for themselves. And in somebody else thoroughly learning how to do my process for themselves, they can see like, oh, she is an authority on this because I have now just learned that piece of information because it's been shared with me.
Right.
This same thing can work with coaches and consultants, like talk through, I say to people, what are you saying to your clients on discovery calls, sales calls, and coaching calls? Say those things on the podcast.
Right.
Don't hold back, just talk about all of it and be an open book, share. Sometimes it comes down to sharing some of your failures and what you learned from your failures. I think for me, I have seen my failures give me more credibility and I've learned more from them. So just being an open book in that regard, I feel it makes that authority building a whole lot easier rather than having a million, and we talked about this a little bit before we hit record, the person that has a million talking points that they have to make sure that they stay there and they have to be really perfect. I think true authority comes from people feeling and understanding that you are authentic. And so being your authentic self in the moment. For me, that means I'm pretty casual. So showing up in a pretty casual environment, like what you see is what you get.
Right. And I was looking up some statistics and, we all know what statistics are. You can kind of make them up. And I mean, and these are really vague, and because people can do a podcast completely on their own, but I'm assuming that these numbers come more from, the things that are on iTunes, on all of the various places and the big things. And the current stats are saying that there are about 1.5 million podcasts right now. And so for somebody to think that it's either, now that the first thing is that's overwhelming, which is why sometimes you want to work with somebody because you're going, oh my God. But that also means that no matter what you do, there's probably podcasts that want to interview you about it.
Right. I agree. And there's so many new podcasts coming out regularly. And I think that this is actually a very overlooked market because when you're thinking about being a podcast guest in that traditional PR or marketing arena, you would think like, I don't want to be a guest on a brand new podcast. However, when you think about it in terms of connection, when an entrepreneur, I say, especially an entrepreneur audience, when an entrepreneur is deciding to launch a podcast, what that says to me is they are serious and they are committed to growing their business. Right. Even when they have only aired, their first 3 episodes, that might still be a really good connection for you. And that's actually how I got started, is by pitching people that had new podcasts, because I thought, I just want to meet these people and these people have the message that I have to offer. And then you never know, Deb, people that you interviewed 500 episodes ago, you still have that relationship with them, and they still know you, and your show has grown. You've grown as an entrepreneur. They've grown as an entrepreneur. So I think that I want to encourage people not to discount the newer people. I think that can be a fantastic strategy as well.
Well, and there is such a thing as shooting too high.
Agreed.
Especially if you're new at being a guest.
Yeah.
I have a PR firm, and years ago we had this woman who came to us and she'd written a book, and she wanted us to get her book, she wanted us to promote the book. But it was not, let's start small. It's, I want to be on Oprah's program for her book of the month. There was nothing in between. I mean,
that's all she wanted.
Yeah. And, she didn't want to do local media. She didn't want to do anything like that. Now her book was an inspirational book, and, and very touching. It was her own personal story. And it was a very good book, but and actually something that Oprah might have been interested in. But we tried to explain to her, first of all, that Oprah's people were, the first thing they were going to say was, where else have you been? What other programs have you been on? And for us to say, well, done, that wasn't going to work.
I went straight to you.
Right. And then we also said, you do have to build, but doing, 20 local interviews might actually do more for you than being on Oprah, because it comes back to what is their market, all of those various things. And it turned out she didn't work with us. And she was never on Oprah either. But, it was one of those things that was very interesting because, and then of course our big thing was to say, okay, say we get you on Oprah and you get, and this was, before print on demand and things like that with Amazon. We said, an average book goes on Oprah and there's 30,000 orders placed the next day. Can you fulfill that? Well, no, of course she couldn't.
Right.
And so we said, so then you're going to have a lot of people that are saying, hey, Oprah, I couldn't get the book. And,
right.
and so, it kind of all ties in with what is your goal? If you're going on these programs to talk about, say, a new webinar series that you're giving, a new training program, if you're not ready yet to give that program, then you shouldn't be talking about it.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that there's less, I don't know, I'm curious what your feedback on this is too. What I've thought is there's less longevity. Like what I'm looking for is like just that, I guess I would say consistency. I want the consistency. I don't want that like massive hit and then nothing else. Like with Oprah, there's tons of competition for her attention. So she's going to give you the attention, but then she's going to be moved on to the next thing versus somebody else who's more on your level. You're going to have that consistent attention from them and they're going to be open to having that relationship with you. So it's a slow build over time. And I'm more interested in that than being hit with a million new people right now.
And it's like you were saying, it's about building that network.
Right.
So, somebody goes on our podcast and then we put it on, say, our Facebook page. My personal contacts go, oh, wow, I really want to get to know Kristin. That doesn't happen if you're at some of these extreme high levels. No. I watched your video that you have, and you talk about the fact that, if you go on a podcast, you kind of average getting about $1,000 worth of potential new business. And so there's the monetization factor, folks. And so that's why you really have to think about this and really have planned through it. But it is about expanding that network, about, and especially now that we're not going out and we're not networking, we're networking online.
Right.
And, and this is, it's just kind of an exponential thing.
Yeah, it is. I think that's interesting I love really that you pulled up that number. I don't think a lot of people that interview me take the time also to do that back end investigation on me. So I really appreciate that you know that.
And it surprised me. It really did surprise me that really is that you have found that for good interviews that are well placed, it's about $1,000 ROI.
That's how we knew we had really hit something. I remember calculating that number myself, and I probably still have the page in my notebook where I had listed each of the clients that had come as a result. And then I, had QuickBooks open and I was, doing all this stuff. And I said to my team in Slack, oh my gosh, this was probably in May or June. I said, oh my gosh, do you realize that on average, every time I do a podcast interview, this is what adds to our bottom line. And and that's for me why it's been a good consistent strategy. If you look at our packages don't average $1,000. So what that means is that sometimes there's two, sometimes there's three, sometimes there's none. But yeah, it's a longevity strategy. It's a long tail approach for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was looking at your package and obviously people can look themselves, because it isn't that you pay for 1 month. This is something that is a long-term type of investment. And in a lot of ways, to me, it's the same. You're investing in yourself as kind of that marketing tool. You don't have your website up for just a month. You don't have, your Facebook page up for just a month. That you do this as something that goes on and on and on.
Yeah. And I talk about it with our clients as a snowball approach. One person opens the door to the next person who opens the door to the next person. You don't just jump to, our clients say like, oh, can you get me on Pat Flynn? It's like, no, we can't. But can we get you in the door with other people that have already opened the door to Pat Flynn or, whoever, put any name there, that's why it is a snowball effect. If you want to get on Deb's podcast, well, what people does Deb know that are more in your arena that you can then snowball? So, I mean, that's another reason why this is a networking play for us. How do you connect with people that are rubbing elbows with the other people you want to connect with?
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We added something recently too. So the way somebody becomes a guest on our podcast is they approach us, and we do have a form on the website that says be a guest, request to be a guest or something like that. And, unless it's somebody that I really know, I'm going to make them fill out the form. And part of it is I want to see that they will fill out the form.
I bet you weed people out that way, which is fantastic.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you'll love this. I've more than once, I have had agencies say, oh no, we don't do that.
Oh my goodness. Do you know how, I could very simply show them how to take an appropriately written pitch and copy and paste the correct elements into a form.
Yes. Oh yeah. And
it's not, goodness.
And there are, there are obviously a lot of places, especially when you're working with some type of agency, they develop a one sheet for you. I got one the other day that was 17 pages long. I'm like, oh,
that's not a one sheet.
No. And, but it was a big font. I mean, the really funny thing was you could have put it in one page, but, and so they just want to send me their one sheet. And I say, no, you need to fill out these. Yeah, and it's cut and paste, folks. I asked for 3 to 5 talking points. You cut and you paste them from your one sheet. And that's more because my process, I just go through and I see these things. And initially my producer does. She goes through and she looks at them and goes, oh, this looks good. This one, maybe not so much. But yeah, some of it is, can you follow the instructions? But we added, and it's been maybe 6 months ago or so, we added a field. Now we've had in there for a long time. How did you find out about the program? And so, a lot of people will say iTunes, Facebook, whatever. But now we've added, who referred you to the program? And that came from a friend of mine, Brian Basilico, who has the Bacon podcast. And he will only interview people that have been referred by somebody else that he either knows or has been a guest on the program.
Very interesting.
So it really is about those connections and that network. Yeah. And so if somebody just tells, so when we get the agencies that are just sending me 7 pitches in a row, they can't put anything there. And so then my response is, we will put you on a list. Thank you very much. We will put you on a list. However, those with personal connections do take priority.
Yeah. And you actually, that was the response I got, is that people with personal connections take priority. Yeah.
And I've had some pushback from that. I had one person say, well, how do we develop that? And I said, you do exactly what we're doing here.
How do you develop that? Have you ever, how did you meet your husband? How did you meet your best friend? How did you meet,
it's
this relationships.
It's that whole thing of, you don't walk up and say, hey, you want to get married.
But
and so we said, this is, and it turned out to be a very good conversation with her, because she said, okay, we do want to develop that relationship. And so they are now an agency that if we have a hole, if we have a need, things like that, we can go to her and say, okay, our interview fell through, it's for next week. So we typically try and plan a little bit further out so that we're never really getting caught in a bind.
Right.
But she is now a good resource for us because she's listened to the program. She's, and that's the other thing. You want to make brownie points with me, you say, we listen to the program.
Yeah.
Am I going to know? Probably not. But, that really, and so, that really is just one of the things to say is, I've listened to your program. Now, the really good ones will say, I really liked your interview with so-and-so.
Yep.
And so, and part of that too is then, okay, it's an hour-long interview. It's a chat. Sometimes we go off on tangents, all these various things, as opposed to there are some, some programs, and you've probably dealt with them, that are very structured.
Oh yeah.
We're not structured.
Yeah. I was on one recently. It was a 7-minute interview. Wow. I did it because it was really awesome to just challenge me. Could I talk about this?
I've done a 15-minute one.
Ooh, that was fun. But you hit on two things, Deb, and that I think are just amazing. The two things are, one, that I'm going to say it this way, name dropping. Like if you know a name, like say it. And then we always lead our pitch. Like I said, our pitch is standard, same talking points, the same about me stuff. We always lead with, this is what we know about you. I mean, we don't say this is what we know about you, but I like the Power Hour because blah, blah, blah. I listened to the episode with blah, blah, blah. Like, I think that is the most off-putting thing for a podcast host to get. Here, I want to be on your episode. It's all about me. Now, we do have a line very explicitly in our pitch that says, if you are open to accepting guests, I would like to pitch myself for consideration. That sentence goes after the telling somebody that we are not just sending them, we're not asking you to come on and talk about who knows what.
And then that gets the response from me, hey, you sound like a great guest. Here's our form to fill out. And then, and it's interesting because then we do have a process once someone is a guest, and Kim handles all of this, my producer. But some of this again is, let's see how well people follow instructions.
So good. And
so she communicates with them. She tells them, we need you to provide this information, and it is different information than what they pitched. But like one of the things we do is we ask for a quote, and then we use,
I liked that, by the way,
so we use the quote in the publicity. And I have had to go back and rephrase that many times. And so, it initially said, please provide us with a quote.
Right.
Well, that got us quotes from other people.
From Oprah.
So I was like, okay, didn't do that. So then we had to say personal quote. So then they kind of got that. And then I had to say short. And then I had to say 1 to 2 sentences, and it may be edited, because I got one time that was 10 lines long and it was 2 sentences. It was one. They followed the instructions very well, but short was not in there. But we use that when we promote the program. So it's also not a selling thing. That could be somebody's tagline, depending on what their tagline is or things like that. We've done that before, but yeah, if it's basically, again, go buy my book, that's not your quote. And so now I have done some where it's been somebody quoting about you. I've done that just a couple of times where where I've put in there, and it was a name where they said, Kristin, was the greatest person that we've ever worked with. That's okay. But
and you used it?
We did.
I feel like this is a good vetting tool. Like when I saw the quote, it was like, okay, I know that this has to be others focused. If you're going to give a quote, the only meaneful quote that could come from me is something that's going to help somebody. It's not going to be,
buy my book,
myself up. Yeah. No, everybody's going to sniff that out. If I come and want to be self-promotional, people know you can't hide that.
And from the podcast host perspective, I know exactly why anybody ever wants to be on the program. They want to promote themselves and or something they're doing.
Right.
As scintillating a conversationalist as I am, people don't want to come on just to talk. And for one thing, that's not interesting for the listeners. They want to be educated. They want to learn something new. And so that's great. If somebody has a new book, we're going to talk about, what that book is about, and things like that. And then I always tell them, and please realize this is not, again, a pitch fest. So, if we're interviewing somebody, I will say, tell us what your company does, and other companies do the similar thing. And so things like that, because for the most part, nobody's, quite unique,
I agree.
But yeah, I mean, you're at the end, you will be given a chance to talk about your company and the services that you provide, because it is part of why you come on the program. And I always tell people it's okay to self-promote. I mean, that really is why you're on here. But yeah, I mean, you talk about books. That's one of the funny things. If somebody wants me to talk about their book, then they need to provide me the book.
That's good.
and I'm
I
going
like that
to
rule.
read the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
I now have 8 shelves of books. And it's funny, I tell people an ebook is perfectly fine because that saves them money. But, if they want me to talk about it, I'm going to read it. And I can't tell you how many times somebody has said, oh my God, you actually did read the book. There have been times where I've held up the book and it's got all these sticky notes and all these, and they're like, oh my God, you really did read it. And I said, well, how can I talk about it if I hadn't read it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if they've given me really good talking points from it, I'm still going to read the book. But yeah, so, but again, that's a follow instructions thing. If you want me to talk about the book and you're not going to provide a book. Now I did have one, this is really funny. It was a book it was a scholastic book.
Okay.
And it was $169. And now,
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
there are times where, okay, if I can go to Amazon and get it for $4 or free, I'm like, okay, I'll just go do that. But she wouldn't send me a copy of the book because it was $169. I said, that's fine,
Wow.
but we don't talk about it. And it really wouldn't have made sense to talk about it because that wasn't the right audience for it. But she turned out, it was extremely interesting. She worked for NSA, for the security.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. I was expecting, people to come and get me. But yeah, it's, being a guest. I mean, it's, I tell people it's like going into someone's house. You kind of want to know the rules of going into their house and then follow those rules. If they say, take your shoes off, take your shoes off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that you have to sell. I don't think you have to explicitly sell if you give enough value. Like if you talk about what you do and just teach someone else how to do it, then the selling doesn't even have to happen, in my opinion. I could, and I'm willing to go on episodes and even do trainings for people, even if I can't promote what I do. If you write
some programs that are going to say you can't. And that's just the way they do their program.
Right. And you can write a snappy enough bio that talks about how you provide value to the audience in such a way where people understand if they want that value that you're saying that you offer without talking about all your accolades. And that explicit selling is no longer necessary. I think that the world in general is just tired of being blatantly marketed to. We just want value. And so being able as a podcast guest to show up and just give value, I think is actually the most effective way. Just connect, like take it off the table, provide value, have fun, showcase your personality, do all of those things. And then you don't have to worry about selling, because I've had people that just are so focused on selling that they lose track of everything else. And then it becomes just this like dry conversation. And it's like, okay, let's back up a bit. Don't go there.
And a lot of this comes back to one of my favorite authors. And I've met him in person and I've had him on the program, and that's Bob Berg. And being that go-giver and always providing that extra value, even knowing that you might not get anything back from it. But when you provide it in the right way, that's how it works, because it will come back. When people, when they're going, oh my gosh, Kristin she had such great information. I absolutely have to contact her. That's how that works. It's not that you went in and said, well, now for this, we will do this and this and this and this. And for this, we will do this and this. And because the second that started, people turned off, tuned out, all those various things. But and I think that's the tricky thing about being a guest when you haven't done a lot of it, is how to be that polite guest.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 things that come to mind for me is only talk about the things that you can just conversationally talk about. I think that's an easy way to weed out all of that, like this, that like rigid thinking, just talk from the heart. Right. So I think that gets missed along the way, and it's unfortunate, totally unfortunate.
Well, and it's my job as the host to have done my research and do all of those things to keep that conversation flowing. And granted, that's the personality that I have. I'm not shy. I did have somebody tell me that one
Really?
time.
You're not?
They did. They very seriously told me it's a shame I was so shy. And I looked at him and I said, have you met me? I'm like, you got me mixed up with somebody else. I'm really sorry. But it's my job to make sure that the conversation flows, which is part of why I ask for that information up front. We
Right.
ask for talking points, we ask for subject matter. And part of that is to make sure that it is going to be a good fit. But
Right.
then it is, okay, how is all of this? I need to be able to go onto somebody's website and read their blog, go to YouTube, all these various things, and get those little nuggets of, being able to say things like, you get $1,000 out of potential, that's my job to have done that.
Yeah, you're a great interviewer. I mean, it's obvious that you put your effort into it. And I think as a guest, when you show up with somebody who has done that prep work, it makes the conversation a whole lot easier. I was asked something earlier this week and they asked me the question. And I thought, well, that's like not even anything I should talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes, as a podcast guest, you might be nervous that you're going to be asking you don't know how to answer.
Mm-hmm.
My response to that is, well, then don't talk about it. Like if you
Right.
cannot
and you can
just talk about
say, it, that's not really my expertise.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And that brings some human element to it. The person on the other end would go, I wouldn't know how to answer that either. Okay.
Right.
There's no fault in that.
Mm-hmm.
Just talk about
Right.
the things that you know how to talk about.
And most hosts aren't in the gotcha type of interview. They don't want that salacious thing that you're
that would
going
be
to say.
Just such an odd episode, right? If the person on the other end is just kind of stammering through like,
yeah. And now there are times and we always take a little bit of time, sometimes a lot of bit of time, before the program starts, just chatting.
Right.
And there have been a couple of times where, I've gone through people's stuff and thought, ooh, they didn't mention this, but I wonder if they could talk about it. And so I'll ask them that in advance because I don't want them to go, ugh, in the middle of the interview. Come
on. I actually really love that spontaneity, but I am a specific breed here. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea.
It's been more along the lines of like legal questions.
Okay.
Yeah. I had somebody on one time and I wanted to ask them, this was back when a lot of interviewers would say, give me your Facebook password. And I wanted to, I actually knew people who went on interviews who were asked that, we want to see you. And I'm like,
that is really awkward.
Yeah. And it's not, anyhow, it wasn't specifically against the law. It was, and because there are obviously questions that you can't ask during interviews,
right.
We're planning on being pregnant again, dear, things like that. There are things that you just don't ask. And so I was talking to an employment attorney and I just wanted to know, is that something that they could talk about?
Right.
And they actually preferred not to because they said it varies state to state. And that was fine.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. It would be a confusing talking.
But yeah, point. I don't want to do the gotchas. Back when I was a true PR person, I had some gotchas get me. There was
really.
I worked for a nonprofit, and I'd get a phone call. And it was the expose reporter from one of our local TV programs, and I knew exactly who she was, and it took everything I had to not hang up that phone.
You stuck with it and you gave your answers.
And we actually did fine. I mean, it worked out very well. And
being in PR, you could sniff it out and you probably know how to position things and you can weave in and out.
Yeah. And it was interesting. And, and then when I went back to her and I said, okay, what you called about was true. Here is now what we have done. When would you like to come interview our CEO? Her response was, there's no story now. So I didn't have to worry about it.
How interesting approaching something head on like that would make something.
But I ran around like Chicken Little for about 5 minutes. So I don't want my guests to have that happen to them. But that again is where you have to have done your homework if you want to be a guest. I mean, there are programs out there that do that, and that's just the type of program that they are. And so if you've listened to or watched several of their programs, you're going to know, they like to dig and get those little, and it could just be things like, I see that you went to such and such a university when they had such and such a scandal, whatever.
Yeah. Part of my prep is I like to, right before I go on to an interview, is actually have listened to at least part of an episode before getting right on, because, I listen to a lot of podcasts and then being a guest, I'm like, okay, how am I keeping all of them straight in my mind?
Who am I talking to today?
Yeah. Right. But it's good to know the angle that somebody's going to be approaching you, because there are different strategies for podcast hosts. And I don't even know if guests understand that yet, is, some podcast hosts are interviewing people because they could be their potential client. Like, is that what's going on? And are you prepared for that conversation? Other people are interviewing just because they are trying to learn more for themselves. I think that one's a fun one. People that are building their business. And I've heard this a number of times. I started a podcast because it was a great way for me to meet new people and just get like free coaching.
Ooh, I love that.
I think that one was that's really fun. I like that. But, hearing the perspective that the interviewer is coming into it, I think also gets you more prepared for what you're going into. There's a whole gamut of people. People say, I'm totally conversational. I'm not going to look at your talking points at all. And there's other people that have, we talked about this before too, the same 7 questions every single time. Like, do you know what's going to happen? That doesn't mean you need to get in your head in preparation, because you still, talk about the things but coming into that and understanding the other person's style and personality type, like all of those things are so important. That's prep work that's got to be done. Even if you have an agency pitching on your behalf, we write for our clients the unique sentence about the episode or about the podcast to get you in the door. But that doesn't mean that you don't have a responsibility to go through and do some of your prep work. Like, that's how you're going to be able to show up best.
Yeah. And there is, there's other prep work with, especially when you are first starting out, to make sure you've got the right equipment, to make sure that you know how to do an interview. We all have the speech affectations, the the ums, the uhs, and sometimes you have to work on those. I mean, there are just times where it takes practice.
It does.
To get rid of those, and we still do them.
I substituted one of them for another. I do 2 things. I used to say and I stopped doing and then I noticed that I say like too much in my speech. I also,
if I get Valley Girl though.
But I now notice it in other people too. Or the word literally. That one is overused in my mind. I don't know. But the other one that I do is if I get too passionate about something, and I don't even want to say too passionate because I like the things I get heated about. I think it makes for good conversation. But I will get so on a roll that I'll say the wrong word. Like, say I'm trying to say podcast guest, but I say host and I don't even catch it. And I just, and I just like keep going. And in those moments, I hear back and I go, well, I'm just going to pray that the audience knew what I meant.
Yeah. And they do. They
I'm human, just like the rest of them.
And people need to recognize that we are going to do those things. It was interesting. I was on someone's program, and this was several years ago, and it was fairly short interview. It was like a 15-minute, but she talked to me for like 30, and so I knew she was going to edit it down. Okay, fine. I don't do that. I only edit out if something big happens in the middle of the program, like the UPS man bangs on the door, or I had a guest one time. It was so funny. He said, oh my gosh, my son is texting me. My son never texts me. I'm like, okay, well, go see what's going on. and he comes back and he's laughing. And this was before we were doing video. And he said, he forgot his lunch money and couldn't reach his mother.
Oh, goodness.
And I said, and you told him? He said, I told him, buck up. He was mad that he was the second choice. But, so obviously we edit that out. But,
that's funny.
But yeah, so
that would have been entertaining though.
Oh, it was funny. And so, she interviewed me for about 30 minutes, but then it was a 15-minute interview. And so I listened to it and I thought, she edited out every one of those affectations. So the uhs, the ums, the you knows, and the conversation was so stilted that it sounded like it was scripted, because she took all of those things out. And she told me, she said, it takes me, 3 hours to edit. I'm like, oh my God, I got better things to do with my time. And because we are just chatting, we're going to say, we're going to say, all of those various things. But again, that's where you need to know, okay, is this the type of program that it's going to be? Is it a much more serious type of program, or can we go off on a tangent?
Right. It makes me sad. You telling me that story makes me sad that how much people feel that they have to be a perfectionist. And I think that this even goes back to like a vanity metric thing. Like, say it's not a number, but the metric is like, how perfect did I sound? It's so unfortunate. I think that if everybody working from home and working on Zoom didn't teach us anything else, like, let's just learn, like, we are all sitting in our home. Like, there are things
in
going
our spare
on.
bedrooms.
Yeah. Like, who cares anymore? Like, let's stop being stuffy about it. And let's just own the fact that we are all humans.
Right.
I think it's actually a beautiful thing.
Had things happening. It was like, okay.
Yes. I think it's actually a beautiful thing. And I think it lends well to connection. So let's just like get rid of that stuffiness a little bit and focus on real relationships and not, how robotic can I sound? Yeah. Did I say literally at all in this interview?
Right. Yeah. And then of course, when you think about it, it just totally throws you, right? You're thinking, oh my God, I'm going to say, again, right? Oh,
yeah. I'm reading the book, Psycho-Cybernetics. Have you ever read that?
No.
It's a classic that's all about mindset and stuff. And he talks about the more you are focused on doing it right, like the more pressure you have, the less your ability to do it right is. Right. So do whatever you can in your podcasting journey to like either start small or like practice with a friend or whatever it is. Just loosen up, like just get loose together and have a conversation. Conversations are things we do every day.
Yeah. And it's funny because one of the things that I have discovered is I enjoy it much more now that we've added the video component. Because I can see the person. And of course we did, years where it was strictly just an audio type of thing.
Right.
And then I had a friend one time I was interviewing, and he said, and we started on Zoom, and I said, okay, well, let's turn the cameras off. He said, no, I want to see you.
I think it's a whole lot better. You can read facial expressions. And even when interviews aren't published with a video, I still think that there's an added layer of connectedness that I think that the audience can
Definitely.
feel.
Yeah. And I do give my guests that option. If they don't want it to go on YouTube, it won't go on YouTube. And we've had our YouTube channel for a couple years now. And is it huge? No. And it's not huge simply because it is an hour long. I mean, that's people and people listen to podcasts in different places. We were talking about that before, that, they're exercising, they're in their car, all these various things. And so YouTube, but hello, YouTube is owned by Google. So if you want good SEO, you put it on YouTube.
And content repurposing that doesn't add any more logistics to your plate. I think it's a no-brainer.
Oh yeah.
Heck, that's something that you can take advantage of as a podcast guest. We repurpose my content. The stuff that I talk about can then be used to pull for our own content, even though I'm not the host. I still have said things that are worth repeating.
Oh yeah. And I tell my guests, feel free to do that, which is part of why I don't have advertisers. Because if you have a program with advertisers, they don't like it when you edit them out. But which is understandable. I mean, there's a reason that they don't like DVRs too. It's so I tell people, if you want to edit out and have just, a 30-second snippet or whatever, fine, feel free. There's no problem to that. Because I know you're not editing out an advertiser, and so that's where that comes in handy. But, and then the other thing as the host is that final step that, now this one baffles me every time. And I have made the same mistake when I'm a guest on somebody's program, is we do the interview. We think it's great. We know the day it's going live, and we don't promote ourselves, and we don't, and that's one thing where I'll be honest, if you're working with someone like your company, that's going to get taken care of. I don't have to remember, my gosh, I was on so-and-so's program and she told me it goes live on Tuesday and I need to remember to promote it. No, that was 4 weeks ago. Because if you've gone to all the effort of being on someone's podcast, you need to tell your own connections about it and put it in your own newsletter and on your website and all those various things.
It's part of nurturing the relationship. Right. I mean, if this is truly a collaborative effort, like I want my community to know about you as well. So it's very simple. That's the cool thing about being a guest is you're doing all the work and you're telling me exactly what I can promote. Like just show up and talk about it. So you've hit on something that's really important.
And it is, I've got one big sheet of paper here that is telling me, hey, you were on this person's program, you need to promote it.
Yes.
And
keep the spreadsheets. I remember the first time I heard that, like keeping track of all my contacts in a spreadsheet, people I wanted to maintain relationships with. I thought, oh gosh, that's so stuffy, until I got too many people in my brain and thought, I'm just going to be a bad connection if I don't put some kind of process in place. Right. And you have to realize like the communication that you do have with that person, it comes from a good place and it comes from the right place in your heart. So just stay organized.
And if you've done multiple interviews in a short period of time, say you have a new book out, a new service, whatever, you don't want to go onto Facebook and say, hey, I was interviewed here and here and here and here and here and here.
Though it does establish a bit of authority in your community.
Like, wow,
so I don't know.
I do that I tell people, put that in your e-newsletters. Here are other places that you can, so spread things out a bit.
Agreed.
Or at least do different, do different posts for it.
Right. Don't be that PR agency that sends everybody in one schlup.
But I do wonder when I have somebody who has been a guest and we even provide them with sample posts to promote the program. And we tell them, tag us. Hello. That's the easiest way in the world. But then of course we know if they're doing it or not. Now, if they're not tagging us, then that means we have to actually go and look to see if they're doing it. But if they tag us, we know for sure. But it really does astound me. But then what really gets me is they'll come back later and they'll say, hey, we want to be on the program again. And I'm like, but you didn't talk about it the last time.
Were you actually a good guest? Was there follow through on that relationship, or was it all a facade?
Yeah. Are we just up? Did we go back through the spreadsheet again? We've got a new product, therefore we're going to hit everybody again.
That's unfortunate.
So sometimes we're just sorry, we're booked, or and now we are booked about 2 months in advance. Now, the nice thing is, it's my program, it's my podcast. I can do more than 2 a week if I want to. Something comes up, I can just easily add somebody. It's not like this really is something, but that is one of the ways that I can really tell sometimes is if I tell somebody, we can't get you on for a couple of months. If I get crickets on that one, then I know. Now, there are clearly sometimes where it is a timely thing. Right. But I want them to have told me that. I mean,
that's interesting. That communication.
Well, oh my gosh, Kristin. See, we just talked. We talked. See, this just means we have to do this again. But tell us specifically what you do when you work with clients.
We are a done for you service. So we write the pitch for our clients. We do all of the pitching on behalf of our clients. And what that means is we function as an extension of your team. We believe that all new connections that are made, even from the pitching process, not just from the actual feature process, but right from the start, we want our client to own those communications. So we are not trying to, in the pitching, get YesBoss's name out there. We are trying to get your name out there. So the idea is that our clients show up when they need to put something on the calendar, and then they show up for the interview. I'm all about working less and making more. And so I could teach people how to do it themselves, but if you're anything like me, you might say you want to do it yourself and then not do it.
Right. And we're way too busy for that.
I agree.
By having you do it, it frees us up to do whatever it is we want to go do.
Absolutely. We love the clients that want to just show up and talk and really function in their zone of genius and not do any of that back end stuff. So we love working with clients, especially service-based entrepreneurs. I feel like those are people that may not know that this is a great way to get their message out there, but I am proof that it's effective. It is so effective, and it's so much fun. I promise it's so much fun.
It is. I love that phrase, zone of genius. Ooh, that was just like,
I say talking is my zone of genius. I think you can relate to that. It's like, okay, wow. And as an entrepreneur, we can figure out how to build our business around that strategy, around talking. Wow, what a dream, right? And then we can connect and we can ditch all this other stuff that just has us lonely and behind our computer screen.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, how do people find you and work with you?
Yeah, you can check out our website, YesBossVA.com. In my true living what I preach, I only hang out on LinkedIn. I don't do a ton of other social media, but I hang out there. So if you want to connect personally, I think that would be awesome. Let me know that you came because you heard this episode. I think that would be
always
fantastic.
personalize those requests.
Yes. Yeah. Oh gosh, the requests that come in with no message are just drive me crazy. And my name is spelled very uniquely. So when you type me into LinkedIn, boom, I'm the only one there.
Those
got my
two
husband
A's.
to thank. Yeah. I thank my husband for that one.
Yep, most definitely. Well, Kristin, this really has been absolutely delightful, and I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, me too.
Because, what I didn't ask, we'll have to next time, is how you came up with your company name. Because YesBoss is very,
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
It's to be continued.
Yes. So we will talk about that next time we chat. So I am Deb Creer. I've been having an absolutely wonderful time talking with Kristin Molenaar of YesBossVA.com. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.